Study on rehousing older social housing tenants is being carried out by the Universities of Cambridge and Sheffield in collaboration with the London Borough of Hackney. It focuses on 4 rehousing schemes for which older social housing tenants who are aged 55 or older and who are living in council or housing association properties in Hackney are eligible. The first 2 of these are schemes run by Hackney Council. The downsizing scheme is for tenants who choose to move to a smaller property. It has been running since 2010, but there has been a declining interest in it over the last decade. Hackney has also been running large-scale regeneration schemes since the 1990s. Tenants in estates that are being regenerated have to move to a new home. Hackney Council also supports 2 rehousing schemes that are managed by the Greater London Authority. Housing Moves is open to social housing tenants who want to move beyond Hackney but within Greater London. It's been running since 2012. And finally, the Seaside and Country Home Scheme, which is open to social housing tenants aged 55 plus, is for people who want to move to coastal or rural areas. It's a long-running scheme that has been managed by the GLA for the last 12 years. Over half of Hackney residents aged 65 plus are social housing tenants. This means that these rehousing schemes have potential to reach a sizable population. Our study is asking 2 questions. How have older social housing tenants experienced the process of moving through the rehousing schemes? And what have been the health-related outcomes of older social housing tenants moving through those schemes at individual and collective levels? Our study design involves several components. There are a review of the literature and analysis of relevant documents. We are collecting primary data with older tenants who have moved through a postal survey. In addition, we are doing a photo voice project with 16 of those tenants. We are asking them to take photos that represent their experience or the effects of having moved through those rehousing schemes and discuss them in interviews and focus groups. We are carrying out interviews and a focus group with 5 older tenants who have expressed an interest in moving but who subsequently decided not to move. And finally, we are interviewing 12 practice-based stakeholders from different organisations and sectors in relevant. The literature review and the documentary analysis are at an advanced stage. I won't elaborate on the emerging findings. We've carried out 12 interviews with 14 practice-based stakeholders from different organisations. The participants have highlighted incentives and support for older tenants in the rehousing process, including financial incentives such as help with moving costs, practical support such as help with organising the removal process, and a personal touch where housing officers build up a relationship of trust with the tenants whom they're supporting to move. The interviewees have also identified barriers to moving, such as a lack of suitable housing stock for people to move to, the cost of moving, and worries and confusion about bills in a new home. Finally, the practice-based stakeholders highlighted some outcomes of moving for tenants. Their quality of life can be much improved. Moving can bring tenants closer to family members, but also some people struggle and it can take time for them to settle in and they need further support. We've carried out a survey with tenants who have moved through a rehousing scheme. As this chart shows, we have not had as many responses as we had hoped for. We acknowledge this as a limitation and we are currently working on ways to boost the numbers. Nevertheless, it's already given us some interesting insight. The survey identified what tenants had found most helpful in the rehousing process. Frequently mentioned by our participants across all the different categories of movers were the support they had received from various agencies and individuals, and also different aspects of the rehousing process, such as communication about the process, property viewing online, and being given enough time to move. The survey also identified what tenants had found most difficult in the rehousing process. Highlighted by participants across the different categories of movers were aspects of the rehousing process, such as it being stressful, and they were reluctant to move due to emotional attachment to their previous home, and that getting their preferred property was difficult. Mentioned by movers in every category except for downsizers was Hackney Council as a difficult factor, such as lack of support and communication from the council. Encouragingly, 9 respondents who had moved through the regeneration and Seaside and Country Home schemes felt there had been not much or nothing at all that was difficult about the rehousing process. The survey identified welcome outcomes of moving through the rehousing schemes. Mentioned most often by participants in all rehousing schemes were aspects relating to the greater manageability of their new homes. For example, that it was easier to keep the home warm and clean. Those tenants who had moved out of Hackney also highlighted environmental factors such as a nicer outdoor environment. More specifically, the survey identified welcome health and well-being outcomes. Particularly tenants who had left Hackney or London mentioned positive experiences of the environment such as less pollution, it being quieter and a slower pace of life. Common among downsizers and regeneration participants were positive experiences of their new home, such as it having the garden and there being no damp or drafts, and an overall positive effect on health and well-being, such as feeling better, happy and less stress. As well as welcome outcomes, the survey identified unwelcome outcomes, but fewer unwelcome than welcome outcomes were mentioned. And among tenants in every rehousing scheme except for downsizing, an increase in rent and bills were common experiences. Among the downsizers, the most common unwelcome outcome was the loss of friends and social connections. Unwelcome health and well-being outcomes were only mentioned by participants from the downsizing and regeneration groups. Issues highlighted, among others, by the downsizers were challenging aspects of the new home, such as it being too hot, it having stairs and there being no balcony. Regeneration participants mentioned broad adverse effects, such as generally feeling unhappy, more lonely due to little contact with neighbours. This is where we're at. We're in the process of getting the Photo Voice project going, and we are planning to interview people who have decided against moving shortly. Our dissemination plans include an exhibition of pictures taken in the Photo Voice project that will be open to the public, and a workshop with stakeholders in policy and practice. The aim is that the study findings will inform the work of Hackney Council and other agencies on rehousing older social housing tenants. Thank you.